always knew that at some stage I would write about our life as it was in Uganda. And then there was this incident of racism at one of the supermarkets here in Cheshire. And whilst we were discussing it, my daughter Yashmin suddenly asked me, and she said, "Dad, Father, what was it like being in Uganda?" And you know, whilst I was thinking of racism and whatnot, and I was thinking our own experiences when we came to this country. There were great people around here, but racism was common. And I was thinking, and then when Yashmin said to me, you know, what was it like in Uganda? And I thought, well, maybe the moment is just right now. It's just right now to write about Uganda, to write that story that I have been thinking of for many years. And that's where Shattered Life comes in. There are two versions of Shattered Lives. One is through the eyes of innocence, because I've gone back to the time when I was a child, and I've written and seen me as a child. And on the other hand, there's kind of an academic second edition. So let me just give you a quick rundown of what is actually in Shattered Lives. What's it all about? You know, why is it important? Why is it a good history? Why is it an important history for us? Because this is for real. This is what people went through. This is what people enjoyed. This is the kind of lifestyle they had. It's in this book. It's also in this book what happened down there, what happened to the communities, how they were destroyed, how they were before they were destroyed, what our lifestyle was like. And I'll tell you something, it's absolutely mind-boggling when I was writing this. And so let me give you an idea. I look at this book now, and I'm looking at this, and the first chapter is about discrimination, and then it goes on to tragedy. And the reason why it goes on to tragedy is because my beloved father, our beloved father, he actually died here in a car accident here in United Kingdom. And I've written about him as on that chapter, so that I could explain what his lifestyle was like back home. You know, the kind of life he led in Uganda, and how things were here. So that's that chapter. But chapter number 3, I think, is magic, because it's boarding school. It was quite common for rich parents to drop their kids off at the boarding school. For me, it was at the age of 9. It was 1965, and I recall January 1965, and my father took me down to the boarding school in a place called Masaka. I was exactly 9 years old. He dropped me off there. He paid for my fees and my boarding school fees and my school fees, and gave me the spending money and everything, and off he went. And there I was on my own. You know, so I've written about what life was like being in boarding school. I think it's hilarious, it's fun, but also it explains a lot of other stuff, what a 9-year-old feels like. So there's that one. And then chapter number 7, the military coup. This is an actual event, the way exactly it happened. That is the day when Idi Amin actually took over the country from Milton Obote. And I happened to be on my journeys, on my business trip to Kigagati, to sell the mineral, our wolfram mineral, at the British Metal Corporation in Kigagati. And whilst we were there, we saw Obote's photographs thrown down and destroyed, and Amin's photographs being put up, and there was a major discussion about this army general that's taken over our country. And I thought, Obote, because Obote was a great friend of my family, and I thought, you know, here we are. So this chapter is explaining that. This chapter is also explaining about the curfew that night, and it's explaining about Idi Amin's very first speech to the country. He's telling the country that he is not ambitious. He is a soldier. And then when matters settle, that the country will be returned back to the civilian rule. This is 1971. And then there's a chapter here, which is chapter number 12. and it's called Deadline. Deadline. Why deadline? Deadline is when Idi Amin gave 90 days for the British Asians to leave Uganda. Now some of the Asians, like my families, had been there for 3 generations. Born and bred Ugandans, that's all we knew. So that chapter is explaining what it was all about. What it was about to be asked to leave your country. That's what that chapter is saying. You know. And then there's chapter number 13, another event, when we had to flee Kegagati at night to run from being bombed by Tanzanian army, which then they bombed Uganda. They were bombing our property, our mines, and we were the people in between. We had to flee at night and somehow make our way home. And this chapter is explaining what we went through that night. I can tell you it was absolutely awful. It was a terrible night. And that chapter explains everything. And then back home in Barara under Idi Amin, under this 90 days rule, the way they were going around, killing people, dead bodies everywhere. And I recall this particular car being pulled outside our house on High Street in Barara. And the car belonged to my father's elder brother. And the guy stopped, the officer stopped the car, opened the boot, and there was the manager of Ugandan commercial bank in the boot, being beaten up. He was left in the boot there, and they asked us if we knew him. And of course, the answer would be no. And then he was taken away. I'm not sure they ever saw him again. So that's what it was like under Idi Amin. And then going further, chapter number 18. It also explains the day when we left Uganda. It's explaining what we felt like leaving our home, actually coming here to United Kingdom. So this book, Shattered Lives, is an account of how life was back in Uganda, how communities functioned, what was the closeness about those communities, and communities from all walk of life. For every single community, it did not matter whether you were Christian, Muslim, Hindu, you were all one, you were all same people, you lived together. The lifestyle, the communities were absolutely brilliant. And this book explains all that. This is the real story, the real history of that time. And this is what Shattered Life is. It's something, anybody that will read this book, or the second edition, will actually see what it was all about. And emotions will totally destroy you when you read them, because that's all it's all about.